So our first panel of day 2 is a new era of DevOps, apps without blind spots. And that's led by none other than Noah Yago. Noah leads Cisco's investment and acquisition activity in the areas of big data and analytics and cloud. He has over 2 decades of experience building companies as a venture capitalist, entrepreneur, and board member, leading investments in DataRobot, Dremio, Mesosphere, CyberArk, Click Technologies, and many more. He joined Cisco in 2017 from Triangle Peak Partners, and his current investment focus areas are IT ops, developer-facing technologies, AI, ML, and data platforms. So when I asked Noah about a fun fact that I could use while I introduced him, he said that actually his first experience as an interviewer was back in the mid-90s when he interviewed Dr. Ruth for a now defunct teen-oriented PBS television show. Take it away, Noah.
Thank you, Ashley. Well, everyone, welcome to what promises to be one of the most exciting panels for Explore 2020, the new era of DevOps, apps without blind spots. My name is Noah Yago. I work at Cisco Investments, and I head up data analytics and cloud. And a big part of our job is really to think about the IT operations space holistically. And one of the areas that's probably really central to a few key trends in the market that are driving a lot of innovation right now is DevOps. Square in the middle of the transition between on-prem to cloud migration and the disintermediation of IT operations. And we're hearing a lot of buzzwords in the space right now, things like shift left, a whole lot of other dynamics that are going on that are really just changing the way that different companies and buyers and consumers work in the marketplace. So today, I've got 3 CTOs and co-founders of 3 of the most exciting companies in the space who are going to join me to have a discussion really about what do all these changes in the marketplace mean, and what are the blind spots today in the application development world. And I'll hand it over to my guests here to allow them to introduce themselves. Let's start with Liran.
Hey guys, so my name is Liran Haimovitch. I'm Rookout's co-founder and CTO. I have a long career in software development and cybersecurity. And for the last 3.5 years, I've been founding Rookout, where we enable data collection from live application without having to write more code, redeploy or restart. You can just instantly collect data using non-breaking breakpoints.
All right, thanks, Liran. And then next, let's go to Matias.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm Matias Madhu. My background, started my career at Ghent University out of Belgium, where I looked into static analysis. And with that knowledge, I actually moved to the US and joined a company called Fortify, which was working on static analysis and finding problems in code. And I thought it was all too easy to find problems in code. So we started Secure Code Warrior, where the idea is really to make sure that we create secure code from the start. And at Secure Code Warrior, as you said, I'm the CTO and co-founder.
All right, and Alon?
Hello, everybody. My name is Alon Eizenman. I'm CTO and co-founder of Sealights. My background is enterprise software. Several other startups all got acquired. First one was acquired by Mercury Interactive. I spent some time building up monitoring solutions and some testing solutions, testing automation. Started another startup company called Nolio that was acquired by CA, where we developed release automation. And that's actually what led us to gain, the experience and how the CICD market evolves, and the new bottlenecks led us to start Sealights.
All right. Well, thanks. Well, each of you, at some point in your career, you founded these companies and you saw a pain point in the market that was probably really related to a blind spot, the topic of this panel again. And I'd love to just hear from each of you, what actually led you to the point where you wanted to start a company to solve this opportunity that presumably customers were asking for or the market was asking for? Alon, why don't we start with you? You actually have a very long history in the testing market, as you mentioned, going back to the Mercury Interactive days, where you've seen the evolution of the space in the marketplace. So you obviously got to this point where you saw a real need for something like this. So I'd love to hear more about what brought you to that point.
Yeah, and the old testing market is always evolving. If we take 15 years back, it was mainly large, huge, I would say, enterprise QA unit sitting and approving everything. Basically, they get a huge release and they release it over the years. It was evolved in a way that companies wanted to increase velocity, and they started building lots of automation, and that's actually led us to starting Nolio, where we built a CICD or mainly continuous delivery platform, where we were actually pioneered in this market, where they used our solution to build up an end-to-end automation for the entire pipeline. And then when we saw, companies, really large companies, going into this, CI/CD and automation, then actually it started repeating. Every customer increased their speed, and they started getting lots of other issues. It almost became a chaos. They couldn't control what goes in, how to approve a build that is being deployed. They splitted the teams into services or microservices, and faced new challenges. So we actually ended up thinking there is a need for another initiative here, where actually led us to start Sealights, to hit there, exactly where they need to take a better decision when something is getting promoted inside the CI/CD. That's how it actually led us from one company to the other.
So you're looking at the software and the breakpoints after the software has actually been produced, where Liran with Rookout, you're taking a different approach. You chose to enter the process earlier in the phase when the developers are working on the project and they're in the debugging phase. So how did you get to that point?
So it's a bit more, I would say, complex than that. At Rookout, when we just started, my co-founder and I, we found it very odd that for any change in the system, you actually have to go through this entire CI/CD pipeline. Almost anything requires writing code, rebuilding it, redeploying it. And we kind of thought it from a cybersecurity mindset, and we figured there are many changes we could probably do away without rebuilding, redeploying. We can just bypass the CI/CD pipeline, go directly to the source and get you the data you need, or update the application and so on. That's kind of what drove us to see that even with CI/CD, still updating application takes a long while. And doing that just to get a small piece of data is just such a big waste of time and effort. And using Rookout and similar tools, you can just go in, say, I want a piece of data from that piece of code. I want a variable, I want a log line, and instantly get it without going through this more traditional approach of create a new version just for that.
Interesting. So really what you're saying is it's not really a question of where in the software development lifecycle that you start, but it's more of a question about blurring the lines of traditional processes and then inserting the analysis and the breakpoints in a point that makes sense in a modern environment. Is that fair?
Exactly. We're seeing Rookout being used in greenfield when building new projects, when maintaining existing projects, when going through integration cycles or user acceptance cycles, wherever it is you're going through and you need a new piece of data for an engineering effort or even for a business effort, Rookout allows you to skip the line and instantly get the data.
Well, I'll note that you mentioned security as an area of interest when you actually considered starting the company. And Matias, you built a business completely around this philosophy, this changing philosophy that developers are increasingly responsible for security. So what's interesting is among this group, you have 3 different views and 3 different angles, all really focused on a similar problem, but maybe at different pieces of the stack. So we'd love to hear from you. your view of the blind spot and really what brought you to the point where you decided to found your company.
Absolutely. And I would like to take us like 20 years back. And I think 20 years back, you actually had to show and prove that security was a thing. Because 20 years ago, if it was functionally correct, if it was working, it was just fine. So we had to actually exploit code, and we had to really prove that code was broken. And once we were able to do that, there were companies coming to light that were finding more of these problems, like static analysis solutions, pen testing solutions. They were showing like, hey, there's more of these problems in the code. And there was this whole area of companies finding problems in code and finding more problems in code and finding them faster. And I think 5 to 10 years ago, there was another shift more towards like, hey, well, now we found them. That doesn't mean they are fixed, we have to switch from very reactive to more proactive. And the blind spot over here is throughout these 20 years was actually the developer. We didn't teach the developer. We didn't show the developer how to write secure code from the start. So we thought about like, hey, how can we make something interesting for a developer that teaches him how to write secure code from the start, which means it has to be fun and engaging. It has to be in the language and the framework that he's using on a day-to-day basis. It has to be there when he needs it. So we thought about a solution, a training solution, which is just there for the developer and there for the developer to help with security, because all too often throughout history, security has been seen as a negative thing. So we've built a business around the positiveness of helping developers writing secure code from the start. And we do that through training. We also do that through tooling, which integrates with the pipeline and with all the tools that a developer is using on a day-to-day basis. So our vision is really, we want to be there for the developer. Yes, it's about security, but we want to be there for the developer.
It sounds like an interesting point, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this seems like a pretty significant cultural difference where you're actually putting the responsibility for security into the hands of developers. How do they react to that when you first take that to them?
So I think ultimately security is still responsible for it, but I think security figured out, or application security figured out like, hey, gee, we can point out problems, but if we don't get the developers on our side, well, nothing is going to happen. We can block them, we can stop them, they will not like us. So we have to get the developers on our side. So I think in the last 5 to 10 years, these two groups of people are growing more and more towards each other. And I think the days that an application security person is no longer able to code are unfortunately over. So I think they're no longer the paper guys moving stacks of papers with problems around. No, they have to sit down with the developer, help the developer, teach the developer how to do it in a correct way. So I think that's what changed.
Okay, and then I'll ask the same question that I asked Liran and Alon. Blind spot in a couple words, just to summarize.
Blind spot in a couple of words is 100% that we have to focus on the developer. There's not enough application security people. There's on average 1 per 100 developers. Think about 100 people. How do you guide 100 people in real time on a day-to-day basis in writing secure code? So the blind spot is really that we forgot that the bits and the bytes are written by the developer, and we have to help the developer.
Okay. So just on that point, go ahead, Alon.
Actually, I wanted to bring in something very similar to what Matias was saying about, moving from a reactive, and it's really, really similar for us, moving from reactive to proactive mode. Same as we see now that, mainly companies, they large projects, they release code into production. Many times there are lots of, escaping defects, and the users, actually their users are discovering most of those defects. And what we enable is the same thing: become proactive and basically shift left and let them discover the potential defects in advance. And very, very similar on a different angle.
I agree, and I think it takes some time for companies to see that, that with being proactive, you can actually save a lot of money. The analogy that I always like to make is if you build a house and you do not think about an alarm system, you do not think about electricity, it's going to cost you more later on. So I think with security, it's the exact same thing. Think about it, be proactive, and unfortunately, it takes some time, but ultimately, it's going to happen.
Well, when you think about this whole process of who is responsible in today's market, and we've heard terms like DevOps, DevSecOps is a new term, which is really it's a portmanteau that no one likes, but everyone seems to use. Well, who should be responsible for it? Where does the buck stop? Is it at the CEO level? Is it the IT ops? Is it at the developer? Some combination of above, security teams? How would one think about that from a management perspective?
So I don't think security or quality could be expected to single-handedly own those aspects any more than you would blame a corporate lawyer, if one of the employees in the company murdered someone. I mean, the lawyers can provide some professional guidance, they can provide the tools, but they can't be there for everything all the time, and they can't force everybody to behave. And so in the same manner, security, ops, quality, each has its own responsibilities, and the rest of it is about motivating and guiding everybody else to align, to get everybody to understand what's best for the organization and get them working for it. And so that's DevOps, DevSecOps, whatever you call it. It's about empowering people and getting everybody to share in the responsibility. Well, the buck stops nowhere. Everybody is responsible. Everybody has to get it right.
Yeah, and if I can pick in on that one, I think that's absolutely true. I think the whole organization has to rally around that. And what we quite often see, if it's just a checkbox, if they're doing it for compliance, and that's the only reason they want to bake in security, for example, well, we actually prefer not to work with companies like that. We really hope that they can do it for compliance. Don't get me wrong. They can, of course, do it for compliance, but they have to believe in it. They have to say, yes, our organization is ready for this shift. We want to move towards this new way of working. Then we love to work with these organizations, because if everybody rallies around it, you can get something done in that organization, and it actually works.
Yeah. Actually, we see it on a different angle, not just for security, but for quality. And usually for us, you were asking about management. It's the VP of engineering. He is now responsible for the entire quality, both on the dev side, even on the on the production side. And they are they need to improve. They need to actually take better decisions based on data, not just on feeling, and improve their velocity, at the same time improve their quality. That's what we see, and it's full responsibility of engineering.
Well, so as you bring about all these organizational changes and different levels of responsibility, it also calls into question another topic. So let's call you all next generation startups, and we believe that's 100% true because we've invested in all three of your companies. But how does that change your thoughts on go-to-market? So if you have these new personas who are now more active in the markets that you play in, how does that change how you sell, how you price, who you're selling to, all of those things?
So
anyone feel free to jump in.
I would say modern software engineering organizations, modern IT organizations aren't focusing as much on cost reduction and checkboxes as in the past. Matias mentioned around compliance. Alon mentioned other topic. Companies are more concerned with the business results and the business value of their IT, of their software engineering. It's about when you throw around stuff like digital transformation, then you can't think anymore in terms of, is my Outlook up or am I getting service from my cloud provider? You have to think about the value you're generating for your business, for your users. And so you have to focus more on how do I generate more value? How do I meet my business KPIs? I want my software to be secure, because that way it's going to provide more value. Not that I can check some box. I want my software to be high quality, so that it can provide more value, not so that I can check some box. And so it's about empowering the developers and giving them the tools. And to be honest, developers are very expensive, and it almost doesn't matter how much you're going to pay for software and how much you're going to pay for the tooling. They are going to be so much more expensive, the developers themselves, that if you're not getting your money's worth for paying them, for getting the business KPIs you care about, it doesn't really matter how much you're paying for the software itself.
Well, also historically, you had very clear lines of distinction between the person who bought your software and the person who used your software. You used to have central IT, there was a procurement process, and then that would go into the hands of the people who actually use that. And that's changed. So I think that to some extent speaks to a few of the points that you make.
Yeah, actually, that's what we see. Usually on the VP level, sometimes CIO level, they are accountable for velocity and quality, and they would basically push the use of Sealights to increase the velocity, or keep increasing the velocity without compromising on quality. At the same time, the developers and the QA engineers would be the actual guys that would benefit and would use our data. So they're actually relying on them. They, at the end, the developers and the QA engineers would be the end users, supporting the need coming from the VP of engineering and CIO.
Yeah. I think for us it's a maybe a little bit different in the sense that our buyer is quite often still at the security side, and our user are the developers, and it is security that benefits from the developers using our solution. I think the core value, and going back to what Liran just said, I think the core value of what we provide is it is instantly noticeable that you will have less security incidents if you train your workforce. What we're actually doing is we go back to the core of the whole problem, if I can use that word, which is the developer is just writing stuff. And throughout the CICD, we're finding problems, but ultimately nobody is fixing them. And slowly but steadily, yes, we're putting these processes in place, these blockers in place to fix issues, but still it all goes back to the developer. So if you can help him, if you go to the root cause of who's writing code and you're helping that person, well, essentially you get some benefit, you get some ROI, because stuff goes faster in production. There's less blockers being thrown, and you help the business shipping software with confidence, reliably, and that's ultimately your goal. So we're in terms of sales, yes, it's still the security people, the AppSec people that buy our solution. Developers are using it, but also developers are benefiting. So we also, in our sales process, we bring these two groups of people together. They have to learn and work together with each other, developers and the security people.
Yeah, and there was one more thing I wanted to raise about large companies where they already shifted or transformed into CICD and automation. They ended up having just too many pipelines and too many standards, too many tools. They are now actually standardizing again and building up like unified pipelines. And with that, we see more center of excellence teams that are pushing Sealights. Or they would be the guys that would bring it in and implement it, and then align it with the with the standard pipelines, and then enable it to all the teams that would benefit at the end.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like the central functions like central IT are maybe playing a more evolved role, where they're acting as advocates for certain software, where the purchasing decisions, or at least the adoption decisions, might be coming further from the developer community or shift left. Although in Matias's case, you've still got the CISO dynamic, and it's a tool where you're actually trying to change the philosophy and establish the first line of defense with the developers.
It's a balancing act. We're seeing some companies being more open to distributed team picking their own tech stack and picking their own tools, while other companies require a certain degree of approvals, or even just still go to centralized procurement. It's a range, and obviously it shifts as people change, as companies evolve. And it's never easy to say what's right, because on the one hand, you do get a lot of pipelines, and you do get a lot of messy IT, and with dozens of tools, and each with its own end of life and upgrade cycles and whatnot, and security not to mention. On the other hand, if you get too blocky and everything has to meet the same pattern, then you're blocking innovation and you're preventing the next generation of tools from being adopted. So I think the corporate world is much more aware of this dilemma today than it was in the past, but nobody has the magic recipe for how to make it work.
If I look at one financial that I have in mind right now, I think 15, 20 years ago, they really tried to standardize on one technology stack. And unfortunately, they couldn't keep that together. And everybody started using their own languages, their own frameworks, their own IDEs. And now they're trying to get that back into, let's use this particular language, this particular framework, this particular IDE, and it's actually not working. And I feel that is really the rise of the developer. They are more powerful in an organization. They have more to say because they know best what to use for what kind of solution. So we're not fighting that. So with Secure Code Warrior, we're not trying to fight and say, you know what, you have to standardize on one language, one framework. We do the opposite. We try to support as many languages and as many frameworks as possible and help the developers write secure code in as many stacks as possible, because we feel that in organizations, converging towards one language framework is not possible these days.
Yeah. Another thing, by the way, it's the ops guys, like App Dynamics customers that would today want to shift left and actually would start bridging in between the dev and the ops guys, and that's something that also raising today. I would say the need to take some data from production and let the QA guys, the dev guys, also use, for example, understand where they are lacking testing based on usage data from production, and also when you have an alert. How would you determine, who is responsible, or at least, change some code there, and by the way, it's not tested. Then bridging this gap is also the next big thing, I would say, in DevOps.
Alon, you bring up the feedback loops, but Alon, you bring up a great point just about the data and the quality of data that might be different in a production environment versus a testing environment. And Liran, I know that you spent a lot of time in that space. You mentioned just at the beginning of this session that Rookout, sure, there's applications in production environments, but there are a number of other applications and ways that you can use it by trying to combine live data sets with production environments. We'd love to just hear more about that.
So ironically, even though on our laptops we have the least quality of data, our laptops as developers, our own laptops are the least predictive environments to work on. They don't have the same number of CPUs, they're not running the right operating system, and they definitely are not don't have the right data. And still, as developers, we spend the majority of our time working on our laptops. Now, obviously, if you're just writing code, it doesn't really matter. But once you move into integrating, executing, debugging, then you are essentially working in an environment that's very far away from what you're trying to actually achieve. And there's been a lot of work around that space about standardizing environments, trying to get dev and staging closer to production, and everybody's working on it. It's a never-ending cycle. And still, there is still going to be a difference. And even worse, when you put production data into play, then you got a whole set of compliance and security risks and controls, and it's becoming even messier. And so what Rookout is trying to do is to empower developers to work in the environment that best fits whatever they're trying to achieve, rather than the environment where they have the best tooling at. Kind of like Matias said, where they're trying to bring every developer in every language, in every framework, the necessary skills, the necessary knowledge to develop securely. We're trying to provide every developer with the tools to investigate his code, to understand his code, to work with his code in whatever environment that's currently relevant. You have a bug in production, work in production. You have an integration issue in a user acceptance environment, work in that environment. don't spend your time and effort trying to simulate that environment, simulate the data in the wrong environment, just so that you could try and guess what's going on in the real world.
So one thing I would like to add with Liran, his point that he was making is, I think even after that, with the whole new shift towards DevOps, is I think sharing is super important too. So even if you do that, if you find some blind spot and you mitigate that, I think in the new world and the way people are working, it's no longer writing documents and sharing documents. I think there's new innovative ways. The what is it called, ChatOps? The way we interact with developers, the way we interact with each other within organizations is changing too. So I definitely agree, and I think there's even an additional point of sharing information and sharing knowledge with each other. And I think that's going to go through a drastic change in the next 4 or 5 years on how we share information with each other. Everything is going to be digital. It's not going to be on paper. It's not going to be text. It's going to be in the language, in the framework, in the tools that we're using.
Actually, that's one of the key things with us, with Sealights, that having like an end-to-end view, and you were talking about different environments. I think it's the key to understand how you did across all the environments, not just one environment and then take a decision based on one environment, but you have to take like an end-to-end view of what you did, how you tested your code across the entire pipeline with all the different environments, and then take a decision.
Absolutely.
I think collaboration is becoming a key factor, a key selling point in any DevOps tools out there. It doesn't matter if you're commenting on code on PRs or sharing incident data through Web Dynamics or whatever it is you're doing. In every tool out there, you're expected to be able to collaborate, and you're expected to be able to export the data and the results you're getting into other collaboration tools out there. You take a Sealights report and put it in Jira, identify an incident in Secure Code Warrior, and make sure that you notify the right people and make sure it gets fixed, and maybe educate more people about it. Same goes with Rookout. Once you collect a piece of data from production, maybe you want to share it with a colleague to get his insight on what that data means, or tell him that data shows a bug he has in his code. Collaboration is becoming critical to how we work, and our tools are expected to support it at a ever higher level every year.
Absolutely. I think it's tearing down the barriers between all the groups, like DevOps. You put two things together, DevSecOps. What you're essentially trying to do is you try to tear down the barriers between these groups. And if groups collaborate, if they really collaborate, these are the groups that are going to be very effective, very efficient, and they are going to produce really qualitative code. If you can't tear down these barriers in an organization, unfortunately, it's not going to work for these groups.
Yeah, and I think Liran mentioned it earlier. Having one, let's say, a developer understanding what's going on in like in integration lab or in staging lab. How did we do there? With manual testing even. It's impossible. They are not connected. There is no way that let's say a developer or a QA engineer that used to automate his test would get some insights of what's going on in after the manual testers run their test in UAT environment. So it's impossible to make the bridge, and that's also a huge amount of data to analyze. It's impossible for a person to analyze so much data.
So that raises a really interesting point. How do we think about collaboration? Is it as simple as using a collaboration tool and creating a connector to something like WebEx Teams or Slack? Or do you really need to think about it from a deeper product perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's that simple. But the thing is the content. I think the key is the content. Is what do you send there? You don't want to send just too much information. You have to be very clear. And in our case, for example, if a quality gate fails, and a group has to be notified about that, and take decision or good decisions upon that, they should only get that, and should not get all the data that led us to to bring in, a quality gate failure.
Yeah, I think I agree with that point. So first of all, yes, I think developers, my feeling is our developers are reading email once a week, and all the other things happen in Slack or all the collaboration tools that our developers are using on a day-to-day basis. So I 100% agree that there's a shift here, especially techies. Email is no longer a thing. But then in these tools, yes, exactly right, Alon. We have to give them the right information at the right time that is consumable for them and what they need, no more, no less. It's a very fine balance, but we have to give them that information, that little piece of information when they need it, and then we have to, as a vendor, we have to remove ourselves again. We have to say, oh, here is a piece of information. Let's remove myself again from the discussion. You have what you need. Let's move on.
Yeah, people are very busy. They are very busy with the day-to-day tasks. They have to get actionable data. They have to be guided. Say something happened. Do that. It's not as they have to go start investigating, and Liran can probably elaborate more on that, but start running through huge investigations and then come up to the conclusion themselves. I think it's highly important that we bring them the actionable insights to take better decisions.
I definitely agree. First and foremost, you have to get people the right level of data, the right data in their chat app of choice. That's the best. That's the start. That's the best thing you can do. I would say that after you do that, it's interesting to see how do they combine that data into a workflow. Maybe they want to be able to hack the message you send them. Maybe they want to delete it. Maybe they want to forward it to somebody else. And depending on the type of the system you have, then over time you'll probably find more complex workflows that you can better support, whether through the chat tools or other collaboration tools. And gradually you can build better and better workflows so that you're more integrated with your users and to the day-to-day lives.
Yeah, and I would also add, into their existing tooling, for example, if they used to run through pull requests, they have to get the go no go decisions right in where they take decisions. Can I merge the code or not? When they click the button deploy into production, they have to get that there. It's not just getting it in a messenger or something or an email, but also in the actual tooling that they used to use and take decisions.
Absolutely. I think the tools that are going to make it in the next 5 to 10 years are the tools that let other people integrate with you and are really let you do extensions, for example, plugins into your solution, extensions, integrate with other solutions. If you're focusing on that, so first make sure you have some value, but then second, if you integrate with the other valuable tools, I think that's key to success.
Absolutely.
Well, in terms of thinking about that, collaboration is one element of it. And then the data that you have access to, there's probably a degree of richness that you have with different data sets that help you position your product in a more capable way. What is the most attractive set of data that you could have access to for each of your businesses that will enable your product ultimately? And some of you have integrations with App Dynamics, for example. And how do you think about companies like that versus other players in the ecosystem?
In my case, and I mentioned that in earlier, I think the most exciting part is take like an incident happening in production, understand what the code that is involved there, and then point into the developer that made the commit, enabling the organization to go directly to that developer, asking him, and see some commits that he did, asking him to probably fix the issue, and then take it back as fast as possible. And with our test impact analytics, test only what's needed to be tested, and take it as fast as possible back to production. The whole cycle is becoming extremely fast and very efficient.
If I can pick in on that one, I think the identity of the developer is becoming very important. And for me, there's actually two ways I can think about that. So first of all, there's the developer as such, really the developer that is doing or taking training. And if you say, hey, you know what, go back and you've made a mistake, well, then you can also link that to, hey, has that developer taken training? What kind of training? Is he skilled in a particular area? Is he not skilled in a particular area? And you can, again, help that developer and say, well, you've made that mistake because there's a portion of training that you should have taken or is best to take for you. And the number two is very similar. If you integrate with App Dynamics, it's the same story. It goes back to the developer. It goes back to the identity of the developer and what is that developer capable of? What are his skills? What can he touch? What can he not touch? And based on his skill level, you can already anticipate what the outcome is going to be of an incident, for example.
So for Rookout, first of all, we integrate with AppDynamics and other monitoring tools. Obviously, you can send the data you collect through Rookout to anywhere you want instantly. But I would argue our most valuable data is no data. And that's part of our approach. We're about enabling data collection. We're about empowering developers. But the data itself, that's yours. We can process it for you if you want us to, but it doesn't matter for us. You can just hand it off to you and let you run with it at your own pace under your own terms.
Yeah, actually, we see that very often. The concern of letting a SaaS product to access the code or to upload anything of code or binaries to the cloud in order to make all these analytics. And actually we do the same. So we do not access the code, we do not upload any binary, any code to the cloud, and we actually worked really hard to achieve that with all the dynamic instrumentation that we only do on the binaries itself.
All right, well, interesting. Let's do a quick lightning round because we're starting to get towards the end of our time here. And the question that I wanted to ask all three of you is 3 to 5 years from now, who's going to be the most significant company in the DevOps space? And you're not allowed to answer your own companies. Anyone else on this panel? And I'll leave it to you to take it from there. And then we'll make closing statements and we'll thank you everyone for their time.
If I go first, I think it's going to be a company in the development space, much more than in the ops space. And I'm pretty confident not everybody will agree, but I'm still convinced that it all starts with the bits and bytes that need to be written. And if there's an organization that can play in that field, that can do really well helping developers with getting a qualitative product out there fast, reliable, then that solution is going to win. Which company, I don't know, to be honest. I really don't know, but it's going to be a developer company.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would say companies like GitHub would get probably control over the entire DevOps. I'm not sure about DevSecOps, but would spread across the entire pipeline and get probably control over there. But I do think that we would see more and more, let's say, of the ops guys shifting left. Mm-hmm. Companies, like AppDynamics, Dynatrace, Splunk would try get hold of DevOps as well.
Liran?
I would say the most dominant company in DevOps for the next 3 years is probably going to be GitHub. Ever since they got bought, they've been doing crazy well with amazing features, and they're obviously very big. 5 years from now, I don't know, that's ages in DevOps, so who knows? But next 3 years, probably GitHub. That's my bet.
Okay. Well, this has been an incredibly fascinating discussion. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. Being Absolutely. In the seats that we sit at Cisco Investments and Cisco Corp Dev, we spent a lot of time thinking about the future state of the world, what the key drivers are in the markets that we cover. And one of the great privileges is to be able to work with our portfolio company founders and CTOs who are really just at the tip of the spear in terms of trying to figure out a lot of these problems. And I know that I'm personally very excited about the new era of DevOps, and you share that enthusiasm, and I hope everyone else has enjoyed this. And hopefully this has shed a little bit of light in terms of how, not just the blind spots, but how to solve them in the future and what the world might look like in this space over the next 3 to 5 years.